I just did something that I hate to do, and I never do. I just took some cold medicine. So if I start hallucinating and saying things, you know it's not me or the Holy Spirit, it's the cold medicine.
Well, I didn't say that Eric is a New York Times best-selling author, which is true, but the last time I introduced Eric and said he was a New York Times best-selling author, I think you said that's not necessarily a great acclaim, right?
I hate the New York Times. I didn't always hate them. When they actually reported the news, I thought they were okay.
Well, let's start at the beginning. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and the home and the family that you grew up in?
I wish I could, but I really can't. Hello. I'd be delighted. My mom and dad grew up in Europe. My dad grew up in Greece. My mom grew up in Germany. They escaped those troubled regions in the 50s to come to a great country called the United States of America. And by the grace of God, they got here. They met in an English class in New York City. And when I say English class, they weren't studying Chaucer. They were studying how to speak English. And they met and married. And because if you're raised in a home that's Greek and German, that means you will be raised Greek. I don't know why. It's just the way it is, right? So I grew up in the Greek Orthodox Church, and some of you know, I know there's some people here, when I'm in Texas, you're familiar with what's called cultural Christianity, right? In other words, if you're Greek, you go to the Greek church. Nobody's asking you, do you believe in the Nicene Creed? Do you believe Jesus rose from the dead? Do you share your faith at the workplace? Do you read the Bible? Whatever. Nobody goes there. It's just you go to the church, you have a cup of coffee, don't cheat on your wife, and be a good boy if you're a kid and stuff. You know, it's sort of, you don't really get the guts of the Christian faith because it's kind of what everybody does. Everybody goes to the church. Now, most of those folks are the most wonderful people I've ever met in my life, so I have nothing bad to say about the Greek community. But what happened is, if you grow up in that, by the time you go to college, you've not been prepared. And I went to Yale University. It was my dream, you know, just to go to one of these great universities, and I went there, and I realized pretty quickly that I did not know what I believed, and that if I was challenged about it, I just didn't know what I believed, or even whether it was defensible intellectually or whatever. So what happened to me at Yale is I just drifted, you know, in every way, politically and theologically. My father always raised me to be a patriot, to love my country, because he knew the other side, and my mom, you know, was raised that it became East Germany, and they taught me to hate communism and stuff. But when you go to college, if you're particularly stupid, and I certainly was, you're open to drinking the Kool-Aid, to picking up the zeitgeist, and I really did. And so I drifted and kind of floated, and I became what you see now when you turn on TV. A lot of these students that they're angry at the man, you know, they're angry at somebody, and they have no clue intellectually. They're just sort of sad. But colleges are doing them a great disservice. And Yale in the early 80s was already there, big time politically correct, whatever. So I just drifted and floated. And by the time I graduated, I always say I was an English major, I wanted to be a writer. And the antidote to what you pick up in college and all that kind of stuff is you just distract yourself for the rest of your life, get a really good job, and work hard, and before you know it, it'll all be over. You don't have to think about the meaning of life. That's a bitter joke. And on the weekend, there's like sports and alcohol. You'll distract yourself long enough, and you get there. But I did not get a good job because I wanted to be a writer. I was an English major, so I floated around and had a lot of time to think about this stuff. And if you graduate and you're not sure what you want to do or what you believe in, and you don't get a good job, you know what's going to happen. You will move back in with your parents. That's what happened to Eric Metaxas. And if you find yourselves in the hands of, I was just talking to a descendant of Jonathan Edwards, you know, sinners in the hands of an angry God. Well, let me tell you something. A feckless Yale graduate in the hands of working class European immigrants is every bit as scary as sinners in the hands of an angry God. Because my parents are looking at me like, we worked menial jobs to send you to college. We didn't get to go to college, son. And you move back in with us, and you don't know what you're doing with your life. I would say like I was trying to find myself. They'd be like, we'd love you to find yourself a job and move out. So that's the long answer to Kurt's question. Would you prefer the short answer?
Yes.
Too late.
Yes, too.
So that's the long answer. So I found myself totally confused, and around my when I was 24 years old, at that point, living with my parents, was the first time I realized that I was completely and dramatically lost.
In working together with Eric over the last, I don't know what it is now, 7, 8, 10 years, but I've heard Eric say a lot in public audiences in Europe, Jesus changes everything. When did he change everything for you?
Well, I guess, while I was living with my folks, it was, sometimes things converge, and to have graduated at Yale University with these grand ambitions and to have won awards for my writing at graduation, and then 3.5 years later to be nowhere and to be living with my parents and realizing I don't know anything, and also convinced, because this is what the culture will tell you. They don't say it in so many words because they don't have the guts. And these universities don't say it in so many words because they don't have the guts. But what they're effectively communicating to you is all the big questions you have. Is there a God? Who am I? What's the meaning of life? Does life have meaning? Where do I come from? Where am I going? They're communicating to you those questions do not have good answers, so we will not ask those questions. And if you do ask those questions, you will get depressed because it's ugly. It's to say that life has no meaning. But that's really, I'm not going to get into it now. But so I was beginning to appreciate the meaninglessness of life and the fact that you couldn't know. If you're intelligent and educated, you cannot know the answer to, is the Bible true? Is the God of the Bible real? Did Jesus rise from the dead? The smartest person in the world would at least say, I don't know, and most people would say it's nonsense. And so I found myself in a position of tremendous despair, and I met a guy on the job. Now, actually, to make the comedy worse, so my parents said, well, you got to get a job. You can't just hang around here and pretend to write. What are you doing? So what can you do with an English degree from Yale? The Yiddish word is bubkis, and actually not quite. You can get a job as a proofreader at Union Carbide Corporation in Danbury, Connecticut. In other words, if you want to talk about my worst nightmare for a job, to work at a chemical conglomerate proofreader, you're not like reading novels. You're reading manuals of, how much acetylene a truck can carry across this. I mean, it's really bad stuff. And it was the Hebrew word is Gehenna, right? So I'm glad we have some biblically literate people in the crowd. That's always encouraging. So it was so miserable, but I thought, I got to make a buck. I can't be living with my parents and doing nothing. So I was doing that, trying to write. And at Union Carbide, in this horrible place, for me, it was just a nightmare. I met a guy who was a very committed Christian and very wise about how he approached me, and we would get in these conversations and stuff. And I was always like, tell me more, but don't get too close because you people are insane. And I'm not kidding. It was like this weird cat and mouse thing, and this went on for months, and he just loved me and stuff. And after almost a year, I think I was beginning to be open to maybe it's intellectually possible to be a Christian, maybe. But I was certainly nowhere near there. And one night I had a dream. I won't tell you the story, but if you go to my website, actually I hope you'll go to my website. It's just my name, ericmetaxas.com, because there's a ton of stuff there that we won't get to talk about here. But the Lord met me in a dream. I gave the testimony at the I Am Second. Some of you know I Am Second, whatever. But it's just, there's a short video where I tell the story of the dream. But it is one of those mind-blowing, paradigm-blowing things that happens in your life. It was a dream. I knew it was God speaking to me in the dream. Anybody try to talk me out of that, I just say, look, I know. I don't have dreams like this. This was God blowing my mind. I woke up. I had no doubt Jesus is Lord. The Bible is true. And if I'm tortured, I can't change my mind because I know. It's not like I think now. I know because I've met Jesus. And, I can't get into the details right now, but it's just, it was utterly, it was the gift I needed because my brain was so muddied with objections and confusion and whatever. And it was like God just punched through the sheetrock and said, here's Johnny, something like that.
Your Macedonian road experience before we went to Macedonia.
What's that?
That was your Macedonian road experience before you went to Macedonia.
That's correct. That's right. And it's not called Macedonia. It's called Northern Macedonia.
So how long?
It was called Macedonia when you invited me there. But now, being Greek, I have to say, you can't call it Macedonia. It's Northern Macedonia. Yeah.
Yeah, the Greeks don't like that.
We don't want to get into that. That's dark stuff. Yeah.
So how long after Union Carbide did you start writing for VeggieTales?
Well,
true story.
When the Lord came into my life, I knew that I had not been doing anything particularly right, and I just put my whole life in His hands in a dramatic way, in a way that we all should do every second. But I did it for the first time in my life. I was like, okay, Lord, I haven't been handling this career thing very well. Maybe you could take a crack at it for a while. And so the Lord miraculously, I don't use the word miraculously lightly. I wrote a book on miracles. My bar for miraculous is high. It's, when you really know God did this. It's not just, it was a blessing. The sunrise is a miracle. Yes, but not, what I'm talking about is a real miracle. The Lord miraculously, by some circumstances, gave me a job writing children's books. I never had an ambition to write children's books. But I kind of floated and drifted as a believer, doing all different kinds of things. And then eventually around the year, I had this dramatic experience in '88, but around the year 2000 or 99, maybe it was 99, the Lord dramatically gave me a job with VeggieTales, writing for VeggieTales. And now I never had an ambition to write for VeggieTales, but I thought, their criteria for writers is pretty weird, right? Like, you have to be able to write comedy. I was the editor of the humor magazine at Yale, and I've always done comedy stuff. You have to be able to write for kids. Well, I just happened to be, writing for kids. When I got saved, I got handed this job writing all these children's books, which I never had that ambition to do. And then you got to be a Christian who understands how to incorporate all that weird stuff together and stuff. So I did get to write for VeggieTales. I wrote a bunch of stuff, a bunch of books and stuff. I wrote the Hamlet omelet parody on the on the Lila Kindly Viking video. I wrote that, and then they let me be the voice of the narrator on the Esther video, so that's my voice on there. And I got to do a bunch of stuff with them, but it's almost like the Lord just wanted to give me this kooky credential that everywhere I go, all people care about is the fact that I work for VeggieTales. It has no bearing on anything else except. That's not really true, but yeah.
I think your career certainly took a different turn when you started writing about Wilberforce and then Bonhoeffer and then Luther.
But it's the same concept. Just as I had zero ambition to write for kids. I want to be like a great novelist. I don't know, like Nabokov or Updike or John Cheever or whoever. I had this great literary ambitions. Never wanted to write for kids, and I've written over 30 children's books now. Never, ever wanted to write a biography, and I always say that I'm far too self-centered to want to spend that much time focused on another person, and that's pretty true. But God has a way in our lives sometimes of maneuvering us in such a way that we realize it actually is Him, and He maneuvered me into saying yes to writing a biography of William Wilberforce, which I had absolutely no ambition to do such a thing, but the Lord kind of set that up, and I did it. And the Lord actually spoke to me about that. And I don't say that kind of thing lightly. I hate when people always say, the Lord, the Lord, the Lord. And it's not really the Lord, it's their own brain. And, but sometimes God does speak rather dramatically in different ways, and made it clear to me that He wanted me to write that book. And I wrote that book, which led pretty quickly to people saying, hey, Eric, who are you going to write about next? And I was like, I never intended to write one biography. What makes you think I'm going to write another biography? But people kept asking, and I eventually realized, what? The story of Dietrich Bonhoeffer has never been told the way I think it needed to be told for many reasons. And so I decided to write that, never expecting much to come of it, to be quite honest with you. But again, God's ways are not our ways. And the Lord chose to make that book a dramatic bestseller that I cannot begin to tell you how little I expected such a thing to happen. In fact, the writing of it was hellish. The publishing of it, I had to switch publishers. It was very painful, very, very, very painful experience for me. It was awful. But God made it clear to me He had His hand on this project in a way that, again, I don't have time to go into, but it was, in my Miracles book, I kind of tell this story. But the book just started selling and became this phenomenon, and I honestly didn't even understand what was going on. And by now it's sold well over 1 million, like 1.5 million copies. It's been translated into 20 languages and will soon be translated back into English, which is great because I can't read the other languages. That's a cheat, just to see if you're digesting the pork chops or listening. Okay. So, and we are now making it into a movie. We've raised $12 million, and we're just about at the end of the raise. We're pretty much done. And we, as of literally yesterday, as my car pulled into the Houston hotel last night, I found out that we have, it seems, a big deal director, which was it was kind of the holy grail for this project, because once you get that, you're all systems are go. So this thing will get made in the next year, and it's been a long haul to get this movie done, because we wanted to have creative control. We didn't want it to be told. We didn't want it to be like a cheesy Christian film, and we didn't want it to be a secular version of my book. We wanted to be the real story, and that's real hard. You all understand that in the media culture in which we live. Sometimes it's a choice between we're going to go this religious route or we're going to go the secular route, and we all know that some stories are kind of down the middle of that if you want to reach everybody, and so it's been a huge thing. But the Bonhoeffer book was God's way of dramatically changing my life, and that opened doors to my speaking at the National Prayer Breakfast and all kinds of stuff.
So the East-West connection I alluded to earlier is that we had the privilege of taking Eric first to Tirana, Albania. And then we went back a couple years later to Tirana and then Kosovo,
Yeah.
and then a year or two after that to Macedonia.
Yep.
So how did God leverage Bonhoeffer and Wilberforce in those
Well, that's what's
trips?
so crazy is that the Wilberforce book that I wrote, I mean, the nutshell version of Wilberforce's life is that he's the greatest politician who ever lived, which is saying absolutely nothing, right? No, just kidding. He's somebody that proved that politics can be and should be redeemed, that a real leader is a leader who loves his country and loves what is right and doesn't care about his personal ambition. And it's a whole story. But the story of Wilberforce, using his faith to end the slave trade in the British Empire and to do all kinds of other reforms that only a politician could do. So clearly we need Christians in politics. That's not the only place we need them. We need them today in Hollywood, and we need them in the media and in TV and all this different stuff. But Wilberforce is a dramatic example of leadership in politics, very dramatic. Because if it were not for him and his Christian faith, the slave trade would not have been ended when it was, and slavery would not have been. I mean, it's just one of these great stories. And so I was convinced to write the book. And after I wrote the book, people asking me to speak on leadership and so on and so forth. And I bump into a friend, James Nethery, who was with East-West Ministries when I was speaking in Dallas. And he says, "How would you like to come to Albania and talk about Wilberforce?" I said, "What?" I never thought of going to Albania. Let me think about it. Sounds like a great idea. And so Jim Nethery, under East-West, had my Wilberforce book, the story of a great political leader who's a Christian, translated into Albanian. At least they told me that's what, I mean, because when I read the book, I don't know what it says. It could be a cookbook. And then invited me to Albania to speak to members of parliament in Albania about leadership. Now imagine the door opening to talk about leadership, to have a book about a great, great man, Wilberforce. It's a great story no matter where you're coming from. And to be able to give it to the members of parliament in Albania that don't know anything about political leadership because they've been under an atheist dictatorship for so many years and stuff. So this is what's called strategic thinking for the gospel of Jesus Christ, thanks to East-West Ministries, because I had nothing to do with this. I just showed up and talked about Wilberforce. But it's such an extraordinary thing when we think that what we believe, it's not just about salvation. It translates to every part of life. And so if you're an Albanian politician with an open mind, you go like leadership, democracy, I don't know, and you read this book, it's a template. And what's at the heart of everything is this guy's faith in Jesus Christ, because Wilberforce didn't just happen to be Christian. His Christian faith was at the core of everything he did, and almost anybody can see that what he did was great. So it's kind of amazing that God used that. And again, as I said, I had zero plan ever to write a biography, and the Lord used it for purposes way beyond my own thinking.
How long did it take Wilberforce to end slavery in England?
Well, People often say slavery, and I used to say the same thing, but when you read it, you realize he ended the slave trade first, and then slavery was ended. So the slave trade was the big battle of his life, and that was effectively 18 years of full-time suffering and hard work when other people fell by the wayside. But this is the key to his story. The reason we all need to have a personal relationship with Jesus of Nazareth is more for us than we're doing God a favor. Because the fact of the matter is, you can never know what you're really supposed to be doing unless you put everything in his hands. And then when you put everything in his hands and he kind of guides you, when things get tough, you realize he will help me through because he has called me to this. This is not some idea I had. And Wilberforce is the classic case. He knew God was leading him in this. So when the going got unbelievably tough and heartbreaking, he just kept going because he knew he was doing God's will and that the Lord had his back and the Lord was going to carry him through. And the Lord did. And when they won this battle, he was hailed around the world as this amazing leader. And he's mainly forgotten today, except for the movie and my book and, some people. But I mean, Lincoln and Frederick Douglass and others hailed him as he was the father of abolition, going back long before anybody was talking about abolition. I mean, 1780s, not a lot of people were on this subject. But if you knew Jesus personally and knew the Bible, as a lot of the serious Christians at that time did, they knew slavery was wrong, but it took them having a hand in politics to begin to affect it, which is another reason Christians need to be involved in politics, because there's people out there suffering. It might be African slaves, it might be Jews in a boxcar, it might be anybody. They're looking to you, to the church, and saying, will you help us? You know the difference between right and wrong, and you're not going to turn a blind eye, are you? I mean, if I'm a Uyghur Muslim in a genuine concentration camp in China today, I know that there are Christians in places like America who actually care about me, who actually care about freedom, who actually care about right and wrong, and I hope that they are using their voice to help me. And I know that there will be people who say, we don't care about that, we just want to make a buck, we want to use China or whatever to make a buck, and we don't get involved in politics. And there are always going to be people like that. There were people like that in Wilberforce's day who said, just let the slave trade go, it's been going on since the beginning of time, nothing we can do about it. But people are dependent on Christians living out their faith wherever they are and understanding that that's why God put you on the planet, by the way. And so that's one of the reasons that I feel the story of Wilberforce and Bonhoeffer to be so compelling, because they really do speak to everyone. These are not just, nice stories from the past.
You now have a radio program and a TV program, and you are known for taking strong biblical, therefore countercultural positions on many, many issues. Where did that boldness come from to be that spark plug in our
Well, I
society?
think if you have any kind of biblical worldview, you know it didn't come from you, right? I mean, it's God made me as he made me. I mean, I can, in the natural, I can say that a lot of that comes from my parents, because my parents are, they've seen the other side. They've seen the dark side, and so they're not afraid to speak their minds. I find a lot of Americans are afraid to speak their minds because we haven't suffered, we haven't, you don't appreciate freedom unless you know what it's like not to have it. And so I think the Lord, by raising me with the parents that I have, helped me in a way to see things that a lot of people who have been here for generations, it's just not as clear. But I know it comes from the Lord, and that the Lord prepared me for these things. And in a funny way, writing the Bonhoeffer book gave me a kind of courage that I didn't have. Because I think a lot of times Christians kind of feel like, I want to keep my powder dry. I don't want to scare any people away. I don't want to be divisive or something. But there comes a time, and you need to know when that time is, to speak. And in researching and writing the story of Bonhoeffer, it became clear to me that there's a time when you got to say, okay, this is it. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to speak on everything, but that there's a time to speak and to say, you know what? If people don't agree with me, or if people hate me, it's okay. It's not my goal to have everybody like me. It's my goal to speak the truth when God wants me to speak the truth. And you need to know when, because there are some people that they're like fire hoses speaking the quote unquote truth all the time, and all they do is drive everyone away. You don't want to be that kind of person. But neither do you want to be the person that keeps his powder dry, and then you find out, oh, the battle's over, and you got a lot of wasted powder that you should have been using. And I really feel that, in some ways with the Trump election, in some ways with the abortion issue, I said, there's a time for me in love to say what I see and to put it out there for people. And you don't have to agree with me, but I have to try to say some things. The issue of life, the issue of sexuality, biblical sexuality and religious liberty, and these issues, there's a time where if you don't speak up, you become part of the problem. And I really believe we're living in some, I don't need to tell you, some really bizarre times right now. And we don't need to agree on everything, but we need to agree on the idea that God wants us to use our faith for his purposes. And sometimes we'll get it wrong, but God loves us and he gives us grace. So even if you screw it up, that's okay. You can get another time and stuff. But the story of Bonhoeffer had made me realize, listen, you don't know if it's all going to be over in 10 minutes. You need to speak up. And so I began, the two hot button issues in our culture are the unborn and then the whole issue of sexuality. Let's say I believe in a biblical idea of sexuality, okay? I don't want to force that on people, but I do need to say, hey, if people have a biblical view of sexuality, you can't force them to drop that biblical view because now the culture says that's bigoted. We need religious liberty in America. We need to be able to agree to disagree. And these are issues a lot of people don't understand and stuff. I was forced to kind of begin to understand these things. So I have become more outspoken, but by God's grace, I hope never in an abrasive way. Sometimes I joke around and stuff and people take it wrong. And I really know that the Lord is helping me to get that balance right, because there is a balance and depends on your personality and the issue and all that kind of stuff.
Did you read Karen Pence's remark on religious liberty in this USA Today? I read about this morning, this USA Today interview. I just was wondering if you were familiar.
I did not, but the Pences are heroes. And this is a perfect example. Karen Pence works with developmentally challenged kids at a Christian school. The Pences are just the gold standard of Christians. They're just, do you think she needs to do that? I don't think she needs to do that, but she just does it. Well, people have decided that to be a Christian is a bigot, and they're going to attack Karen Pence for working at a school that believes in marriage between a man and a woman. And I got to tell you, folks, every American should be sickened by that. You could be pro same-sex marriage. You could yourself be gay and understand that it is un-American to criticize this woman for working at a school where they believe in the biblical definition of marriage. And to say that she's a bigot and they're bigots for believing what the Bible teaches is itself to be bigoted. And if we don't have the guts to speak against that, we are a part of the problem. And I say this as somebody with gay friends. In other words, I have friends that I disagree with on all kinds of subjects. But on this subject, you can't have disagreement. All Americans need to understand liberty, freedom of speech, freedom of religion means that the government cannot force you to abandon your deepest beliefs, except in the most extreme circumstances. If my deepest biblical beliefs tell me I need to shoot people in the head, the government's going to step in. But short of that kind of stuff, the government needs to leave it alone. Just like the free market. Get out of there and let it work. Let the people work it out. And that's something we have ceased to teach our kids. We have ourselves forgotten that's how America works. That is what freedom is. That's what the founders lived for and died for. And if we Americans don't get that stuff, it's over. And so it's vital, especially that the church understand how this stuff works and doesn't work. And we're not talking about theocracy. We're talking about the Constitution.
So you have an audience of about 300 men here. We don't have the platform you have. What's your exhortation to us or counsel to us in terms of being salt and light in this post-Christian, increasingly post-Christian society?
Yeah, well, I think that, I'll just say that the term post-Christian society, I could take that both ways, right? Because to some extent I would say we're not at all a post-Christian society, that it's a ruse, that the media today they despise Trump. 5 minutes ago, they despised George W. Bush. 20 minutes ago, they despised Ronald Reagan like he was the devil. I remember, most of you remember, okay? They're just, look, they went to the same school that I went to. They think a certain way. Nobody around them thinks for themselves. They all have this kind of attitude, you know? And you'd get the impression from TV that we're living in a post-Christian culture. But all those crazy judges and all the crazy people on TV and all the crazy do not represent America. And when I go around America talking, I meet so many wonderful people who clearly are not post-Christian at all. And I realize that this is something that if we, the people, do not assert our voice and say, we are the people, we elect our leaders, we are the government, and we get to decide these kinds of things, and we've been doing that for 240 plus years. We shouldn't accept what the Beltway cultural elites are demanding that we accept, not only because it's wrong, but because we haven't elected them, that the rise of the media culture has made them have a voice that they really ought not to have. It's a strange thing. And so it's kind of a complicated way of saying that we need to use our voices wherever we are. And when you have, the first thing I would say to everybody is God created us to have a personal relationship with Him. Doesn't mean you have to be a religious fanatic or a weirdo, although some of you will be. But what I'm trying to say is that these things are true, okay? And I don't have time to go into it, but I have had to settle that in my mind, that these things are intellectually not only defensible, but the other side is indefensible, frankly. And we need to know that. We need to know that what we believe is true. And then we need to ask Jesus to lead us, because He's the only one. He's the gas in the tank. You're not going anywhere without the gas. And your life becomes, your car sitting by the road looking nice that cannot drive unless you have God driving you and leading you. And we need that. And I think that it's very healthy to understand that you really can't do anything apart from Him. Now, we can quibble about that, but I'm just saying, sometimes you can do great things apart from knowing that He's doing it, but I'm just here to tell you, if it's good, He's doing it. But it's better to know that He really is leading you and that you invite Him to lead you, because every single person here, every single person on the planet is made by God for His purposes in a different way. So there's no two people that are alike in their calling. So some of you, it might just be to be a faithful husband and a good father will have tremendous ramifications that you'll never dream about. Sometimes God calls us to be active in a certain way, whether it's an evangelistic way or this or that. There's 100 things. And so I think it's important to say we're not supposed to be, I want to be like Wilberforce or I want to be like this, but that the model is these are men that were hooked up to God directly, and that when you do that, magic ensues inevitably, because He created you for magic. He created you that your life is going to be beautiful and holy, but in a way different from every other human being who ever lived. So that's why there's no shortcut. You have to have a relationship with Him. That's the real answer. The other answer is simply that I would encourage people that time is short. Literally, somebody in this room will not be here on this planet a year from now. We are not going to be here long, folks, none of us. And you need to understand that time is short, and God calls us, to start working for Him now, not someday or whatever. And I think whatever you have, whatever capital you have, however God has blessed you, whether it's financially or with certain talents or certain time or certain connections to people, He's blessed you to be a blessing. He's given you these things for His purposes. Make sure you use it all for His purposes, not that, as I say, you kind of get caught, at the last minute and you go to heaven and you left all these things and you didn't use them for His purposes. It's like saying, I got all this ammunition, I got all this powder. It's like, yeah, dude, the battle's over. Battle's over. We don't need bullets and powder anymore. We're done. I think we need to know that the time is short, the time is now, and that doesn't mean you blow it all up now, but we really need to ask God, what do you want me to do? Why did you bless me? Why did you allow me to live in a free country where I have a voice? I can say anything I like. I can get in the middle of the street and curse out the president. I will not go to prison for that. That's called a free country, folks. When you can speak your mind, when you can go out and talk about Jesus, when you can talk about the free market, when you can talk about right and wrong and what the Bible says about sexuality or whatever, we're still in a free country. But if you don't exercise your freedom, in 10 minutes it will not be free, and you will get in trouble when you say those things. You know already, some of you in business, if you say this or that, you're in trouble. So we need to use our freedom, and when I say our freedom, I mean we need to use whatever we have because God gave our freedom to us for his purposes, not to be wasted or taken for granted. In my book, If You Can Keep It, that's when I kind of realized, like, wow, what we have in America, I basically took for granted for most of my life. It's just a shocking gift from God that every one of us has this fragile thing called freedom, and we are called to participate in it. And it's kind of like the gospel. It's related to the gospel. It's such a gift that if you have any sense of what you've been given, you cannot do nothing with it. So it's incumbent on us to realize what we have been given. And then after you cease being shocked at the fact that you've got it and most of the world does not have it, you're like, okay, God, you gave this to me. Why did you give this to me? What do you want me to do with this? Because there are tons of people around the world looking at us and saying, I need you to help me. You have freedom, you have money, you have talent, you have all these things. And the Lord gave it to you to help those who don't have it, to be used for God's purposes. So, that's kind of a rambling answer, but it is really central that we understand that we're blessed to be a blessing. Whatever you have, just imagine, we're in this country club right now. Even in America, do you know how many people will never get to be in a place like this? You can't take it for granted. You're a fool if you take it for granted. You realize God has really blessed me with some things. At the heart of it is freedom. At the heart of it is knowing that he's real and that he's with me as I go through these battles. But, the time is now. The time is yesterday to start living out the life that we're supposed to live. And it's not a guilt trip. It's to say that, can you imagine you get to participate in God's purposes in history, that he has deputized you to be a part of something infinitely bigger than yourself. And it's so beautiful and so wonderful. What a horror if we would miss it. Yeah.
Amen. So just a little pivot. As Christian men, why should we care about the Great Commission, and what should we do about it? So we talked a lot about our responsibilities to our nation as citizens here that are incredibly blessed.
Well, the Great Commission is a big part of it. In other words, it's like, the thing about evangelism and telling people about Jesus, I think people can get that wrong in both directions, right? Some people act like evangelism is the be-all and end-all. And I would say no. The point of evangelism is to lead people to the truth, okay, which is, it's infinite. It's about eternity. It's about everything. But once that happens, they cross the starting line. They don't cross the finish line. They cross the starting line. When you accept Jesus as your Savior and invite the Holy Spirit into your life to lead you and guide you, you have just begun to live. And there are people around the world that have never heard the name of Jesus, and all these biblical principles that are wrapped into our freedoms, our economic freedom, we can build wealth. We can make wealth because of the free market. Everybody around the world deserves that, don't they? To be able to feed their kids and have opportunities and jobs and all this. Well, crazily enough, it starts with Jesus of Nazareth. You can trace this through history. So you don't do this so that we can create wealth, but the point is that if you want people around the world to flourish, not just when they die to go to heaven, because of course you want that, but the point is the moment people accept Jesus, suddenly tremendous possibilities enter their lives. And that's why I wrote about Wilberforce, because it was because of his Christian faith that he saw innumerable things and was able to affect these things in the various cultures, including in India. India was under a spiritual black cloud. You cannot begin to imagine the horror of what life was like for people in India at that time. And Wilberforce said, we're making money off of India, just like today we're making money off of China. We have a responsibility to bring what we have, this good news, and all that comes from it to them. And if we don't, shame on us. God will never bless us if we don't do that. And he forced and fought to get missionaries to be able to go to India. The East India Company didn't want missionaries to go to India. They had a nice thing going. You could go over there and have like 5 teenage wives and do whatever you like. They don't want Jesus coming into this, missionaries coming into this, because once missionaries come into this, all kinds of stuff's going to happen, right? Well, all kinds of stuff's going to happen, like women are going to get some rights. They were treated like worse than dogs in that culture. So as soon as Jesus comes into a picture, and that's why I use this phrase that, Kurt, you just referenced, Jesus changes everything, the possibilities of good stuff, it's amazing. And I believe that is part of God's plan. God's plan is not just to get people saved and to translate them into heaven, because we're here, right? You don't just get saved and go to heaven. You get saved, you don't cross the finish line, you cross the starting line, and you begin to say, now I can live for his purposes. And a big part of living for his purposes is sharing your faith, or being a part of sharing your faith with other people. There can be no question about that. And sometimes that's so obvious that I don't mention it, but obviously talking to you, Kurt, you remind me that that's at the core. Wilberforce would not have abolished slavery. He would have not given a hoot about the people suffering in India, and on and on and on and on and on, until he accepted Jesus Christ and said, Jesus, lead me as a politician. You gave me all these gifts. Lead me. And I just find it absolutely fascinating. So he was Wilberforce was huge on getting the Bible translated into foreign tongues, on, getting Bibles into the hands of people all around the world. He didn't just do politics, he did both. And so it's very important that we understand the link. It's more than a link.
How did going on these mission trips impact you?
Well, there's no substitute, like I was saying earlier. When you go to a place that's not like America, the less like America it is, the more eye-opening it is what America is and has, and how people are suffering. I mean, I even have had relatives come, my relatives from Greece. They're just tremendous young people. One of them came and stayed with us for a while, and my wife asked our niece Anna, so what do you see here in America that, and she says, wow, I can't get over the positive energy. It's like people believe things can be done and accomplished, and there's like kind of a hopeful something. Well, that comes out of freedom. The freedom of the free market with virtue, obviously. If you can keep it book, the free market doesn't work without virtuous citizenry. Democracy doesn't work without a virtuous citizenry. But when you see that, you just go like, that's amazing. That doesn't exist around the world. So when I went to Albania and Macedonia, you can feel that lack of hope. And that lack of hope comes from people not knowing Jesus, not knowing the good news, not knowing that the good news leads to every other good thing. And it's just so palpable, and I never would have tasted it any place else. I mean, for me, it was a huge education. I'd never been to a place like that.
We're going to wrap our time up. Eric is going to be at the book table here. There's a bookseller here. They've got more books under the table, so you'll stay as long as people keep buying your books, right?
Well, no kidding. Until I have to go to the airport, I'm hanging out. It's wonderful to get to meet folks. But I do want to say, I hope everyone, because this happens to me many times, I speak to people and then I forget to say, I sent out a weekly newsletter. My radio program, which is now a TV program, we have YouTube videos and stuff. I am interviewing some of the most amazing people and having some of the most amazing conversations. And every week I send out an email, if you go to my website, ericmetaxas.com, that tees it all up for you. You can just say, hey, he's had a conversation with this one, click, and you can watch it and whatever. And it's all teed up for you, so you don't have to kind of wonder when it's on your radio or something like that. I just would urge you for your own, this is called Toolbox Luncheon. I'm a tool in God's hands, right? And, you've heard of that, right? Being a tool sounds like a negative thing, right? Well, the question is, whose tool are you, right? Are you the devil's tool or are you God's tool? I want to be God's tool. I want him to use me. And so everything I do, and I mean this genuinely, is meant to provide tools for you and the people you know, whether it's a video or a book or something. You could say, I need to share this with so-and-so. I need to share this. I'm doing that a lot. And I don't want to fail. I don't want to fail to let you know that if you go to my website, there's a link. There's so many other things we don't have time to go into. But I want you to have these resources because I think that most of you here would find it genuinely useful and be able to use it sometimes to share your faith or to share ideas or something like that. I'm all over the internet, but that's the easiest way to find me and to kind of see what I'm doing, because it's not because I'm doing it, but because God's doing it, and He's given me the privilege of connecting with some really, really amazing people, and I would love you to get to hear what they have to say and stuff. So thank you.
EricMetaxas.com.
EricMetaxas.com. As far as I know, it's spelled the traditional way, EricMetaxas.com. If you misspell it, you might not get there, so you have to spell it correctly, yeah.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for
It's my privilege. I cannot tell you. Thank you.